All right, what's going on, TV land? It's Albert Chavez here with Albert Chavez the fourth, and we have a very, very special guest here. And I've been excited to talk about Josh last couple of weeks. I actually reached out to Josh probably about a month ago, and Josh and I met in our men's group that's called Threshold, and this Threshold group was very instrumental in my growth. It was started when I got out of the desert in 2020 and two other men came together, Brian Paris and Sandeep. We came together and formed this group. And then we enrolled a few more other people that came from the desert. And then Josh decided to join our group last year. I think it was like April or May in 2023. And through that, him and I connected, and we'll talk more about the story. But what, why I was so intrigued with Josh is Josh, him and I talk about this a lot. He was the most difficult man that I ever coached before. And there's a lot of reasons why. There's a lot of things that he was working through and struggling. And so, but what I really love about his story, and we're going to get into it a little bit, is this is a man who really, really raised his hand. And for the first time in his life said, I haven't figured it out. I need some help. And will you support me? And he did that with our group too in Threshold. So again, we'll go down the rabbit hole a little bit, but I have so much love for you, Josh. I have so much respect. I'm so fucking proud of you, and I'm just thrilled to have you on. So I'll leave it there for now. But this is episode 34, Reclamation Legacy Project, and stay tuned. There's going to be some tears, some jeers, some laughter, but you're going to love what we have to hear. So, anyways, I'll leave it to you, Albert.
Yeah, I'm so stoked to have you on, Josh. For me, one of the biggest questions that I've kind of been pondering since we met a couple weeks back is really like, can you one, I'll have you share a little bit more about your background and stuff like that. But the biggest question I wanted to get started with, just to kind of dive everything in, is like, is what really brought you here now? Like why did you feel like you wanted to share your story at this point in time? And then in that, can you share like what brought you here to this moment?
Yeah, thanks again for bringing me on and honored to be here. Uh, what brought me here, well, to this moment and to share my story is, I feel like so many men have been in my space where it was 3 years ago. And with depression and alcohol and just getting by, um, and just not being happy, not happy with your life, not happy where you're at. And, you know, and some people can put up with it for longer. I couldn't. And it just took me down and took me down to a place where I lost everything. And so, you know, I wanted to be on here to just share my story. It's been a rough and hard last, oh shoot, 2 years now. And but it's been worth it. It's been worth every hard moment that I went through and all the changes I've had to make just to be here. And so to have my family back and have my wife and kids back, and now even having another kid on the way. So
Love it. So take us back a little bit. So, just to breathe the story so people can be updated here. So, what was going on 2 years ago in your life that brought you to this? And these are my words, not yours, but to this breaking point where you figure out you needed to have some change in your life. What was going on?
well, I'll keep it short. And it's I was working hard, always was trying to provide, and met my wife about 12, 13 years ago. Well, didn't meet her, but we got together about 12, 13 years ago. And she came out of a bad relationship with trauma and brought that into our relationship. And over time, then I brought that trauma back to her. But it was really like, I guess it was 18, 19, and 20 those 3 years where like depression kind of took a hold of my life. Um, I got everything I wanted. I made more money than I ever did. Bought the house, got the car, got the had the family, and I still wasn't happy. And and it just went down this path. I kept trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was like, well, I got everything I wanted. Why am I not happy? And so I fell into just more alcohol, to drugs, and trying to find this happiness in this external world. And 2022 really like my business kind of was like wasn't making any money, and it all just came crashing down. I was fighting with depression for years and thoughts of suicide, and in 2022 I threatened to kill myself with a gun, and my wife was there and involved with it, and it was not pretty, and ended up, short story, went to jail and for domestic violence. And so, and she left. She took the kids and got out of that toxic place. And and so I was left with nothing. And they were gone. I couldn't see my kids. There's, you know, restraining order and everything. And sat there for a month in depression after that, and just planning my suicide out. And so finally broke out of that and decided that it was like, why am I depressed over someone else? I can make a change. And so I started seeking avenues, and therapists was okay. And I remembered Rising Man.
Mhm.
And so I went back and started listening to Rising Man, and I got involved with the Rising Man team, and finally got on the Threshold. And I have to say that Threshold and you guys, Albert and my team, men's team, was the key turning point in changing my life. You know, Albert, you were right there, like kicking my ass and putting me in my place, which I needed. I needed someone that I looked up to and someone that I wanted to be like. And you also had a similar story. And so I could familiarize with that. And so, you know, I was like, yep, I'm going all in because I want to be the best me.
Love it, man. Love it. Love it. Great
Love
story.
it, love it. Great story.
Albert, you want to ask something?
Yeah. When you were talking about like all this pain and this turning point, right? What do you we're all part of the Rising Man, or we were at one point, I should say, for those that are listening right now. How was it going back towards like Rising Man for you, and what did it mean to like have those group of guys really come about? And do you feel like what did it really take for you to be vulnerable and admit? Because that's a recurring theme that's been happening. Is like, what did it really take for you to finally say like enough is enough, and this is time for Josh to take control and let loose of what's really going on?
Yeah. Um, I've never been really shy with letting my personal life explode it out into everybody else's, but and that was always an issue. But I feel like I lost everything,
Yeah.
and I was $60,000 in debt. I didn't have anything at that point, and so I was like, well, there's only one way up, like one way to go. So I decided I didn't want to kill myself, and I wanted to live for my kids, if anything. Even if me and my wife didn't get back together, I needed to live for my kids. And so I was like, I'm going to do what it takes to do that. And I feel like, you know, talking to most friends, they don't really ask the right questions, you know, and that's what I got in Threshold. And is men that can ask the right questions and aren't there just to like help you, but turn it back on you and like, well, what did you do? You know, if you're sitting there most of the time with other guys, you're complaining about your spouse, and they just join in. And instead, what I got was, well, why did you do that? Why did you say that? And that had started making me think. He's like, oh, so we're not, it all came back to me. Everything came back to me instead of putting my blame on everybody else. And that's what it came down to. What I found is that I blamed everyone for my problems. Everybody else's fault for what I was going through. And once I took that blame and put it on myself, and there was a lot of moments with Albert where I did that, and I had to and I recognized, like, holy crap, I messed up. I was an asshole. I did horrible things. And there was a couple moments where I felt like committing suicide again. Because once all that hits and that reality of who I have been, and instead of blaming everyone else, took that blame on myself and recognized what I've been doing. And now I've got to take ownership on it. That hits. That hits hard. And I remember sitting on the floor, bawling my eyes out, and just, and I got through it. Like, that was a rough day. But it's been a process because it never goes away. You have, it's constant work.
What? So Josh, what I love about you, it's like the analogy mirror, right? I talk about the mirror a lot, mirror versus the window. And when we started Threshold, I think that's one of the things that we wanted to make sure is the accountability piece. Like what did I do? Now it's not my fault that what happened to me in life. It's not my fault that my parents abused me, my mom left, my dad. That's not my fault. It's not my fault. I was left alone and no one cared about me and no one cared my feelings. But at 50 years old, 47 years old, it's my responsibility to fix my shit. And when I met you, I remember just feeling all that. And I told you several times, I felt like I was talking to myself. We were just 15 years apart differently. And 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 what I love what we said is like the hardest part for a lot of men that I've come across and you've seen in life as well is this accountability piece. Like it's my fault. Like I have to take responsibility how I'm responding or reacting. My wife and everybody else I can't let them control me. So I'll share a story real quick. One of the biggest initial fights that Josh had was was when the program I have is about accountability, mindset, and food, and he had this date with his wife, and on the app, this food app he put non-alcoholic beer, and he had pizza and all this stuff on there, and and I remember on the call, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I go, why are you drinking alcohol? And he's like, Albert, it's non-alcoholic. I go, Josh, you're bullshitting yourself. And I go, you're lying to yourself. And so what happened, that was the first time I saw Josh really buy his bullshit. He was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. What's the big deal, Albert? He came at me. And I remember him when I got into a shouting match and I said, bro, get mad at me all you want. Please give it to me. But just understand is that if your wife knows you're trying to go with these chains, she's watching you. She doesn't trust you. And if you're doing this program because you're trying to get your wife back, you might as well quit today because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Doesn't matter if she stays or leaves, you have to fix you. So I'm curious, Josh, if you remember that, what was it about that whole incident? Because I have a feeling that changed a lot of things. Because in the following week, things started shifting. What was it about those incidents that were happening within you internally really helped you maybe see things differently or see things the way I was trying to teach you?
I think the biggest thing was like learning that I was lying to myself.
Mm.
And it's easy to make up these stories like, oh, it's okay,
Yeah,
it's only this.
yeah.
And you calling me out on that bullshit, like, because I remember it clearly, and it was like, it's still beer, and like, we're still drinking beer. that's still in your mentality that you're drinking beer.
Yeah.
You didn't quit drinking
Yeah.
if you're drinking non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
And that there was something that clicked, and I was like, shit, he's right. Like, like and it's like, yeah, it's like the habit that you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna stop doing this, but I'm gonna start eating all this, and it's the same thing, and like you're just talking about, and it's that clicked in my head where it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
Because I know for me, I've done that with like with pornography before too, you know, like with other things where it's just like you try to like mask all these things that we were talking about this right before too, right? Where what are we really trying to mask when we're facing our problems that are in front of us? Like we're just chasing it with something else too. And I thought it was interesting, like just the idea of dopamine is fascinating. I think the more I've learned about it in general, is like I don't know if necessarily dopamine is the bad thing, right? It's the type of dopamine that we're trying to consume. And there's a reason why we're trying to consume this dopamine because it feels good and it floods you, right? And so, like, when you talk about your story of like pushing everything else away and you weren't sure where you were going, you're talking about how you're just depressed and stuff like that too. You were what in your mid 30s at that time, right? So like can you kind of give us more of the story of like when you decided to finally turn that tide around? Like, is there something that finally clicked in you? Like, hey, this is bigger than me. I know you said you were doing it for your kids at one point. When did that kind of shift did you ever feel like you were doing this for yourself or was it strictly for everyone else? Because I've had conversations with many of my buddies who are in their mid 20s where we feel like as we start to get older, like we feel selfish in a way, but we feel like we have to just only do it for other people. And like, I don't know if that's necessarily people pleasing. I'm still trying to figure that out with myself. But is there like, at one point, when did you know this was for you, for Josh, rather than just for everyone else?
yeah, and that was in the very one of the first calls that I when me and Albert started talking, and yeah, I was a people pleaser,
Mhm.
and I always have been, and I've always one thing I realized is one of the reasons why I wasn't happy is because I kept trying to make my wife happy, and when she wasn't happy, I wasn't happy because I felt like I was failing,
Mhm. Yeah.
and so you know that's the crutch that you take when you start trying to live off of making someone else happy to be happy is because you can't control if they're happy.
Right.
And one thing that Albert really, showed me is like, well, who do you want to be? Who do you see yourself? And that's what I like. That's where it's like, yeah, I want to be in shape. I want to look like you. And I want to look good. I want to feel good, and do this for me. Because at the time, I didn't know I was going to get back with my wife. I was like, hey, if I'm going to get on the open market again, I need to look good. And then, but I need to do this for me. And so that was really what um, came down to is it was all what I needed to do for me to make me a better man because I can't be the better husband if I'm not the better man. And so that was the biggest thing I had to wrap my mind around is okay, who am I? And because I lost who I was. And so that's one thing that Albert helped me guide me through of who I really wanted to be and who I am. And so, as a person, as a man, and then later on, back to a father and a husband again. And through that process, because I worked on myself, then my wife, Karen, saw the
Mhm.
changes.
Mhm.
She saw that I was a different man. When I talked to her, she was like, who are you? Like, I don't recognize this person. Like, I completely changed who I was. And instead of all the blame blaming her, when she was saying things, it wouldn't upset me. I stayed calm. I was able to stay calm in all the situations again. And that freaked her out because she didn't know. She's like, no, where's the angry, yelling Josh that would be yelling at me right now? And like, I remember her, she literally freaked out when I was just completely calm. She's like, oh my God, I thought you were going to freak out on me and scream at me. And I'm like, no, that's, I had to look at each avenue. It was like, this is, I caused this. And it was my fault she left. And it was my fault. For a long time, I blamed her. And then I took it back and I had, no, it was my fault. It came down to me. Because even if she wasn't happy in the past, and a lot of things could have were her fault, but it came still back to me because I was still the man of the house and I let that slip in the past where I could have made changes and then none of this would have ever happened. So that's, that's where the biggest change is, that you're doing it for, it has to do it for yourself.
Yeah, I love it, dude. So you went down a rabbit hole that I was going to ask about your wife, because I think one of the things I admire about you the most, Josh, is the ability of your communication with your wife. Because I witnessed it in Threshold last year when you were making massive changes, and you and I talked a month ago about some of the shifts. What have you done differently? You mentioned a little bit about the calmness, but I'd like to go a little more deeper. When you guys have conflict, what shifted about you and how you resolve conflict with your wife, and what shifted with her to allow you guys to at least de-escalate more than escalate like you used to?
Yeah. First it was staying calm.
Mhm.
And then really trying to, I was using like better questions,
Mm,
asking better questions, and not bringing up any blame,
mm,
taking the blame out of it.
mm,
And just, it's like, well, hey, well, why do you feel this way?
mm.
And
Real quick,
instead, or like,
how would the old Josh respond compared to the new Josh? Would the old Josh yell and the new Josh ask questions? I'd like to know a little about that too.
oh yeah, no, yeah, old Josh would just yell and blame and get crazy, and
Okay.
I would shut down and just like go off on
Mm,
like
okay.
tangents and yelling and screaming,
Okay.
and just not even listen. And so the biggest thing that I do now is I just listen
Mm,
until she's done
love it.
and don't interrupt and just go. And it is. That's like just shutting your mouth. And one of the other guys in our men's team, I was like, dude, I was just shut up. That's my advice. Just shut up and just don't say anything.
Yeah.
And let them finish. Let them go through. Let them vent. Let it just, because what I've realized is most of it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And so if you can just listen and be that stoic man that they need, and not get angry at what they're saying, they just want a sounding board. They want you to be there and be that strong person that can just comfort them,
Yeah.
and take on the blame yourself. Like, yeah, you know what? I messed up. And like I won't do that again. I hear you, and repeat it back to them.
Love it.
Well, that's the biggest thing too, and I think that just shows a little bit about like how our men's group works too. Like I think that was the biggest thing that you touched on before, is like just learning how to ask the right questions is so crucial, because we can get wrapped up in our bullshit over and over again. And if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you came back to your wife as the same person as you were, it probably would have led to the same thing of just you going back to screaming, yelling, doing what felt natural, right? But at some point in time, like there was something that was like, no, I'm better than that. I feel like I can be stronger. And I think every man at one point has to go through that stage, to feel like, one, that they are complete in themselves and that they feel like they're, working towards something. And two, like it feels, I'm sure it probably felt nicer too in the whole family unit to feel like you were there to lead as well and not just
Yeah.
be a part of the problem in there too. So, um, I wanted to kind of touch base on like the family dynamic, if you're open to it, of course. Um, because my parents got divorced when I was just about to leave the nest, and we did a whole thing about that last week where I didn't realize how much I personally hid, and I wanted to just get out of that system, and I wanted to really just go off on my own. What have you noticed with your kids? I know they're a little bit younger, that you've been able to kind of talk them through that stage, that tough time when um you did split away from them, and how did you feel like you needed to show up for them and continue to down the line?
Yeah, and at least the biggest blessing, we were separated for a whole year, and I didn't even see my kids for 6 months. And so, um, the one thing that we did agree on is that, you know, we're not going to talk bad about each other around the kids. And she held that. And she, the kids didn't even really know what was going on. They were off at her parents' house and in another state. And so like they didn't really know what was going on. And but when we were around, and what I've made a big point of now is, when like, hey, we need to show them, how to resolve conflict as well. And it's important to, yeah, because we're going to get in arguments. That's that. Just because all this work I've done, it doesn't mean we haven't gotten in any fights. It's happened. But we also fix those fights, and we also do it in front of the kids so that they can hear and they can see us resolve the conflict, and show them that, yeah, we all get angry, and it's just life. But how we resolve it and how we react on our anger is the important part. And so for the most part, you know, that was the biggest thing. After being separated, I didn't want, it's like I wanted to fight back to get my wife back. And I wanted our family back. I didn't want to have that broken home. I didn't want that for my kids. I loved my wife and never stopped loving her. And so that's what made me fight, because I didn't want to see my kids separated and co-parenting and going through that, even though you can do it, but that's difficult.
Yeah.
and so that was a big thing in my choice, that I didn't want that for my kids and my family. And so I'm do what I had to make things right and get my family back together.
So I just want to do a little check-in, man. How you feeling right now? We talked about a lot of stuff. You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Okay, good, good. Just checking in. It's important because I know I know that we could get caught up in emotions and stuff, but it's important also just to make sure we take time, because your story is unique, Josh. I hope you know that. And why I say it, because my story is unique. 99%, and you're one of those 99% of the men wouldn't do what we did. And what we did was we looked at ourselves and we said, I want to fucking live for my family. I want to live. A lot of men will die for their family, but they won't live. And their family wants them to live. See, I'm gonna tell you what, bro. The biggest blessing that happened to me in 2019 was that I lost myself so much. And then when I pushed my kids away and the people in my life that I loved, I was literally so by myself and so alone that I hated myself. And I vowed, dude, I'm like, look, there's no fucking way I'm going to ever be like this again. And when I made that decision and I raised my hand, I wasn't done. I just knew that I needed to do it. That's why I was so hard on you and the men that I coach. I wanted to live so bad, whether my kids were in my life or not, that I was willing to die to live. And I think that's why I love you, bro. Absolutely love you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored to call you a friend, because I know how hard it is to be in your place. And I know how deep that darkness really goes when you're by yourself. And that's one thing that Albert and I have been able to do is coming on this show together. What him and I are now able to do is, as father and son, I'm his father, but he also gets to see me that I'm just some fucking little 9-year-old punk like we all were. I'm just 25 years older than him. And so, before we go into the rabbit hole, is there anything that you want to ask Albert and I about our situation, or maybe something you're curious about?
Yeah, Albert, or Albert Jr. So I'm curious on, because you were older and you did grow up seeing the destruction and the path that he went down. I guess what were your thoughts when you were seeing him go down this like destructive path as a son, seeing your father go down that?
Great question.
That's a great question. Yeah. So I saw it from afar because I was in college. I was in Southern California for
Okay.
the middle to the peak. I mean, I saw the beginnings of it kind of, but most of it I was here in Southern California I was going to college at that point. Um, and my relationship with him was kind of rocky because we didn't really see eye to eye with some things. But from afar, I noticed and I felt it that I just didn't know how to like interact with him that well at first. That was the biggest thing that I felt personally. My sister had to deal with it more directly because she was dealing with it in-house. So I talked with her a little bit about it at the time, but there was just a lot of confusion. I feel like knowing why we couldn't connect with both of our parents really, but in this case, my dad. And then when he got the cops called on him too, it was very, very disappointing to just feel like, why is this happening? And I thought this was an old version of my dad that I didn't know, because he had told me stories about him doing shenanigans like that when he was younger, when he was now my age, right? But to see and hear that and have it affect my sister the way it did directly was more of just disappointment of like, why are we doing this now when we're 40 something
7.
years old? So that was the biggest thing for me is like I just didn't want that to carry down to my sister, and I didn't want um I just didn't want her to feel like she was alone, and I didn't know how to support her because I was still working through my own stuff too to build my own little journey and feel like I was more of an adult. So I didn't really know how to help people at that point in time. I think that was crucial, and I didn't know what I needed to do for my family. So that was the hardest part, was just not feeling like I could support because I didn't really want to support my family then.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to get your trust back?
Great question.
Probably that's probably 4 years ago, maybe five, coming on five. So it's probably like a solid 3 years
Mhm.
after that. Yeah, two and a half. Yeah, because he'd come down, my parents would both come down to visit periodically, but it just felt like, we were still pretty surface level.
Yeah.
I also didn't know how to share my emotions, so that was when I joined Rise. It's coming up on what, 2.5, almost 3 years since I joined Rising Man, which is again very similar timeline on when we started to gain that trust back. Is because again, that kind of like you, I had to take ownership. I had to feel like what was going on with me, um, to be willing to be open about what I was feeling and how to communicate that back to my family.
Mhm.
So once I started to learn how to do that, it was right after my dad came back from the fast, I believe, if my timeline's correct. And so we were both eventually able to like come in open arms. And then that following year was when me and him decided to just talk about it in person. And so that was about a year and a half ago. No, was it only? Yeah, it was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. Um, and then last year was when we decided to do this project. So it's just again, very similar to yours, not as big intensity for me, but it's just how quick you can be from that turnaround time is you can really change the world when you change yourself very, very quickly. It's just how much time we want to put into it, you know?
Yeah, and that's I love you guys. Like, and I love this story because it brings me back to the reason why you asked me why I wanted to be on this. And it's because men need to hear this.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to see, it's like, yeah, you guys figure like, these men's teams and how to listen and how to deal with our emotions. And it's like, yeah, at 50 and at 25 and at 38. And, you know, it's something that unfortunately sometimes it takes to go down completely and get torn down to the ground and lose everything before you want to make a change. And I enough that if you're struggling to reach out and find one of these men's teams or anything or Albert and that's I hear it from so many men now and everybody's like, well, how did you do it? What did you like? And like I have a team.
Yeah.
I have a team of men behind me. And that's what it takes still. And it's still trials, and we're going to keep going through all these trials. It doesn't stop just because, okay, I fixed it, I'm good. And no, it gets harder and harder, and it does get easier over time. But that's where it's awesome to see you guys leading this legacy project and breaking cycles, family traumas. And that's one thing I want to do. I said, no more. I'm breaking the family trauma cycle that has been in my life and in my wife's life, and it's done with me. I'm ending it, and we're moving forward. And I'm going to help my kids grow up in something completely
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I have a saying that I came up with: this conflict avoided is conflict multiplied. And I love what Albert said, but here I'm going to break it down for both you guys. It doesn't matter. Let me back up. None of this would have happened if Dad was still acting the way he was acting. Does that make sense? The reason why there was mistrust to the get-go is my son didn't respect me. He tolerated me. I never built enough respect over time to where he got to respect me. So he tolerated me because I was his dad. But if Dad hadn't put the gauntlet down like you did, Josh, and said, enough is enough. I need to take responsibility for myself. I need to get on the fucking the bullet train as fast as possible to fix it, my shit, no matter what, or else I'm never gonna have anybody in my life. I had to surrender, let my ego go. I had to really be radically honest with myself. I had to look in the mirror and I had to make massive, massive changes so that when they came around me, and this is what I talk to you about, Josh, is your women, your wife, our wives, our girlfriends, our kids, our family, they won't, if they don't feel safe and secure around us, they'll leave us. And that's what I had to learn for myself, is that this version that you see of Albert and the old version, the older version, I hurt so many people because I got so emotional. I never dealt with my emotions like a man. I was emotional. I was an emotional fucking liability. So that liability made my people feel unsafe and insecure with me. So I couldn't lead them. So the reason why Albert are here today is because I had to put in motion things to show him and my other daughters and the people in my that I could be trusted with my emotions, with my fucking word, and with my actions. All of those things don't matter if you don't have all that. If you can't keep your word to yourself with your promises, if you can't follow through on what you say, and you can't have self-respect for yourself, it doesn't matter what you do, your people aren't going to come back to you. And I think that's why I love doing this, is because I just want one more man like Josh, one more man like Albert, one more man, one more woman watching this to know that change is possible, but you have to really, 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 that pain has to be so real that the fear of change is nothing. And that's
Yeah.
what you went through. And that's why I was excited to have you on. So we have about, 10, 15 minutes left. And, so now that you're here and now that you have this new version of it, what what's in store for Josh? What does Josh's legacy want to be left with?
Well, now, yeah, to be an amazing father and to raise my kids to be the men that I see what men can actually be now. You know, it's like growing up and with this whole distorted version of what men were supposed to be, and to have a strong masculine man that is in touch with their emotions and how to deal with their emotions and how to communicate properly, you know, to build that legacy with my children.
Mm.
And because I've done all of this, now my business is thriving and getting into other investment opportunities. And you know, after I read your book, I was like, I remember after reading it, I'm like, damn, I've got a story too. I'm gonna write one too. And so I see that in the future as well.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at and hopefully like work on getting into more of like retreat center, opening up a retreat center and for healing, because our nation needs healing and we need healing. And I see myself working my way into that avenue. And I'm still working on things, leadership roles, training, and trying to better myself. But you know, I want to take, like you are, your story, and I kind of want to do the same. I want to take it and use it to heal and help other men, and and show my kids what it's like to help others and to live and be the father that they need me to be, and the husband that my wife needs to be. And now we have another baby coming. So it's exciting. It's there's no more like dread, and it's like, all right, bright futures. It's a lot of work. It's still a lot of work. There's still healing and still working on things. But one thing that we've done in our relationship that I think is a game changer is that we've taken my men's team and I've reincorporated that to our date night. And so now Karen and I will sit down every Thursday night and do our own version of the men's team and go over our charges against each other and our counsel and how we can support each other for the next week. And that opening up a time every week for us to sit down in a safe space and communicate with each other, that's what eliminates the fights. That's what eliminates any arguments. And that has been a game changer. And again, that's something I learned from a men's team. So taking things and using them to better our lives. And I'm tired of the old life, and
Yeah.
it's so much better
Yeah.
and being sober and having fun with my kids. And it's like, shoot, I went on a bike ride with my kid this morning and I was out doing him. He was all out of breath. And I'm like, yeah, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And, it's like, I was always wondering why I didn't feel good and why I wasn't feeling. I was like, oh, I don't feel good. And it's like, oh, maybe it was all the alcohol and crap food I was eating. And, oh, I was 40 pounds overweight. And, like, and so, now living a healthier lifestyle, and it's life's been great.
Love it.
I feel like it's a reclamation by understanding what you're consuming, the overconsumption that we're doing. It's everything, like you said, like the fact that you're so like aware of what you're putting in your body now and what you're doing daily is it's just so simple, but it's so powerful for everything else in your life too. It's super cool to watch and witness. Even in the last 3 weeks since we've seen each other, I can just tell you're more composed and like just the way that you want to show up too. It's just cool just to witness in real time to see. I guess What is one little challenge that you think that is always going to be with you that that might be relatable for someone watching?
I a challenge that I still battle with um is it's hard being a father, a husband, a provider, and it's overwhelming. You know, it's like I take on everything's on your shoulders as the man, and it's like, all right, you know, it's like, what am I going to do for work and this and how am I going to provide? How am I gonna, like pay for the mortgage the next year? Or, like what savings am I going to get for my kids? And it's like, oh, we got to get groceries and take care of the house. And that I think is a struggle, and it's something that, you know, every once in a while I just it's like it's just hard and it weighs on you. And it's like, man, I was thinking about it, I was like, man, I give it props to my dad. Like he kept his shit together his whole life, my whole life. And great dad. He's one of my best friends. And but it's like, man, he didn't complain.
Mm,
He didn't he just did it and was good. And it's like, man, you know, that's something that like weighs on me
yeah,
because there's days where it's just like, wow,
yeah.
it's just so much. And it's like, I think that's still a struggle. And I think it's always going to be a struggle. And it's just something as a man you're going to, and you know, I think that's where, you know, it's like having my men's team to be able to just vent, you know, get it off my chest and have a place to share, and you know, knowing other men are going through it. And so
Yeah. Couple more questions and we'll end this thing. But I'm just curious, you know, a lot of times we're so in this do mode that we never take time to just be present. So at this moment at 7:50, it's our time, 7:15 on this 24th of September, what are you most proud of yourself?
well, most proud of winning my family back and my the trust of my
Mm,
and having a better relationship now than I think we've ever had. That's probably my biggest proud moment right now is being able to be in my house and my wife's happy and she's proud of me of what I've done, and and I did it. I did it.
So as you're saying that, what are you feeling right now?
Gratitude.
Mm, yeah. I want you to take this moment and just remember that because you're so busy all the time, bro. I don't know when the last time you really thought about that moment. This moment, I'm not sure if you thought about it in a long time, but take this 20 seconds, 30 seconds you did just to say what you're proud of and sit with that for a moment because the pressure that you put on yourself is valid, but also the accomplishments and what you've been able to do to change your life also has a lot of merit. So make sure that you spend some time acknowledging that part of you because I think that'll be that well that'll help you get out of those struggles at times when it just seems unbearable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
You put a lot of work in, and I only know a glimpse of what you've gone through, but it's cool to watch.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's where it's still the beginning. We're not done.
Mm,
Now it's next
yeah.
stages.
Love it.
And you're
And
about to be another father to another child.
Yeah.
yeah, in March.
Wow,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
incredible.
So what did you before we leave here in a minute, Albert to finish up, but what did you learn about yourself in this episode or maybe an aha moment you had?
Hmm. Just that, you know, one thing looking back at everything again is that my perseverance and drive it really do outweigh, and know, got me through a lot. And so yeah, that's one thing that I can say that I do well
Yeah.
is when I put my mind to something, I don't stop.
Mhm.
And so and when it's going for healthy and good reasons, it helps out a lot better in your life than using that motivation for other nonsensical things that in your life that bring pain and suffering.
You realize, I think I had a conversation with one of my guys on my men's team last week. I think he's about your age. I think he's 36, and he lives in Florida. He's got 2 kids. And he was just telling me to like just take it all in, man, because you don't realize how much more efficient you have to be when you have kids too. And there's just something that I'm excited for to being a parent about is just seeing like who I'm gonna be then. I mean, now I'm building up to it and leading up to that moment in time, but it's just cool to I think for me it's gonna be like challenging, fun, the best thing in the world, but I'm just excited just to see where it goes because I don't know who I'm gonna be then, and I hope I can just look up to the lessons that you've shared today. When the back's against the wall, you just have to do it no matter what, and you gotta show up for your kids, and we have a choice when we walk in that door. I know my dad tells me all the time that's his favorite moments is when we were little, running up to him to say hi at the end of the day, and just take it all in for the small little moments that, you know, you don't know how many more you're gonna get.
Yeah, and man, that's where like little jealous in a way that you are like in this place right now that you are already making these changes and learning from us. Like, when I was your age, I was out doing a lot worse things and partying and so for you to be where you're at now, and it's going to be such a blessing when you have your first child, and it just changes you. And it's just amazing to have kids. And I do love walking in the door and my boys just jump all over me and yeah, like and went out hit golf ball Saturday with my kid, and it's just like it's amazing and so much fun. Like and being able to tell them and you're gonna do so well, like going into that next stage of your life, knowing where you're at now, like learning what your dad went through, what I went through, what these other people that you're talking to, and actually learning from it. You know, a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I heard what he did," and no one really pays attention and tries to make it their own. And it's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna make that mistake," and but they don't really do anything to change and recognize what their path is at the moment. And it's so amazing that you get to transform your life at such an early age.
Literally just learning from what you guys are doing. And so I'm thankful for you guys for sharing your lessons with me because I get to do this every week on Tuesday with my dad, but I only get to talk to you once in a while, you know? So yeah, it's fun for me too.
Well, I'll say this, what I got out of this episode is what you just said, Josh, is I say this all the time. I wish you could see what I see, bro. Like I wish you could see me being on this other side of the screen with this young man who, he was that little kid that was jumping all over me. I walked him to school. I coached him and did all these great things. And now he gets to hear other men and their stories, and he gets to get his life time folded by years and years and years by other people's experiences. And the hardest part he has is he gets to decide whether he wants to follow or have his own path. And it's just so incredible for me to sit back and just like you were preaching today, Josh. Like I love it. Like it's really nice just to hear another man's perspective. And I'm just sitting back and watching because I'm looking at my son just absorb it all. So what I got from this episode was just pure magic, man. I just got pure goosebumps right now because someday you're going to be in my shoes with your kids, Josh. And yeah, I'm just super happy that we get to do this with you. But yeah, got a lot today.
One. Oh, my bad. A little excited on there. I want to say thank you to everyone that was able to join us today. We had Josh Hams here from Threshold, thriving and just sharing a little bit more about what it means to really be a father in this world in the 21st century. It's 2024, but it's going to be a new father in 2025 coming in March. We're excited to hear about that. And for anyone that has any questions, we're going to be here every Tuesday. So let us know what else you want us to cover. And with that, we're signing off here at the Legacy Project.
Peace, guys. Thank you.